the Independent Electoral Commission has been heavily criticized for reopening candidate registration for the upcoming municipal elections, with many suggesting that it's been captured. Candidate registrations are open until the 20th of September, and voting has been set for the 1st of November. Of course, you and I know this. Let's speak now to the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer at the IEC, Masego Sheburi, joins me now for that conversation. So we will get to the controversies, but I just want to get your sense and give you time to shine, and perhaps before you and I cross swords one way or another, just you giving me the lay of the land in as far as readiness for November 1 on your side. Going to the Constitutional Court, you were saying you are not ready, you are not ready. Many say all along before then you were saying you will be ready whatever the circumstances. Where do we stand now post the, Constitutional Court Constitutional Court order that said actually the elections should proceed? How far are you with readiness?
Thanks, Thulasizwe. The case that we made in the Constitutional Court was never that we will not be ready to deliver elections as required by the law by no later than the 1st of November. We said to court we have prepared as best as we can for these elections. However, given the COVID situation and the regulations trying to regulate or to curb the spread of the virus, impact on political space and political activity. And to that end, we do not think that elections held in the context where there's a curfew, where there is restriction on movement, where there's no political activity, could be free and fair. Additionally, that given the fact that we could not run a general voter registration weekend in July owing to COVID and the third wave, we thought that a deferral of an election to February next year would make the elections much safer and help us to meet the constitutional standard. Now that the court has spoken, we are preparing for the elections to be held on the 1st of November. We will have a general voter registration over the weekend of the 18th and the 19th of September, where we will open all our 23,000 voting stations to facilitate the registration of persons who want to register for the first time or who want to update their registration details as voters. So we are ready for the registration weekend. We will also be ready for an election on the 1st of November.
So I imagine then, because part of your concern, Mr. Sheburi, was the issue of the ability to freely campaign, right, given the restrictions on movement, on gatherings, etc. I imagine that, and I'm asking you to feel free to mention this between you and I. You've been consulted by the President and the Coronavirus Command Council, haven't you, given that we are expecting that some kind of adjustments will be made?
No, we have not.
You have not? I am shocked.
We have not been consulted, but I am definitely, yes.
I am shocked because I would have thought you would have been consulted to say, this was your concern, that there's curtailment of political freedoms and movement. I would have thought that the Coronavirus Command Council would have consulted you, but nevertheless, that's not on your doorstep. Let me not make it your issue. In terms of what still needs to be done, we have the voter registration weekend on the 18th and the 19th of September. What else is still outstanding on the calendar before we get to November 1?
The voter registration weekend on the 18th of November starts in earnest the process of a constitutionally compliant election, because we're giving first-time voters an opportunity to register. We're giving those who are already registered an opportunity to update their details. After we've run the voter registration weekend, and in terms of the court order of the Constitutional Court, the minister responsible for cooperative governance may now call and set lawfully a new date for an election. We anticipate that proclamation will be on the 20th of September. On that day, the Commission will also issue an amended timetable. That timetable, again, is in terms of the Constitutional Court order, because the court said the timetable that we issued on the 4th remains valid. It is preserved until the minister proclaims the elections anew. And following that proclamation, the Electoral Commission can then adjust the timetable as it deems it reasonably necessary for purposes of freeness and fairness. That timetable will include, among others, the following. There will be a period for people to object to the inclusion or exclusion of persons from segments of the voters' roll. It will include a period of certification of the voters' roll. It will include a period for parties to make submissions of candidates, whether new parties or old parties that had made submission that wish now to adjust some of the candidates on their party list. And it will also include the period for application for special votes. And special votes are intended for those among our countrymen and women who are unable to come to a voting station on voting day. Those can cause an application to be made on their behalf. And if approved, we will visit them on the 2 days preceding the special voting days.
So let me backtrack a little bit just about the environment in which we are. You said a few minutes ago that you've not been consulted as the IEC, but I don't imagine that precludes you from imagining what would address the concerns you had initially about the lack of free movement and free campaigning, gatherings, etc., etc. When you think about it, without being consulted by the Command Council and even the President, what would need to happen to enable the EFF is going to launch its manifesto, I believe, in Johannesburg in the coming days in Newtown or Marshalltown at Gandhi Square, from what I saw in the posters, to enable the ANC to be able to hold mini rallies. I hear that they're not talking about major or mega rallies, and the DA to do the same, the IFP, NFP, etc. In your thinking, what would go some way to addressing those issues around curtailed movement?
On our part, we had already last year, around May and June, in consultation with political parties, agreed a protocol that parties will observe at the voting stations on voting day. So we have protocols in place for social distancing, sanitizing of hands, and enforcing of the mask mandate. However, matters that are outside the voting station, those will be governed in terms of the regulations or the disaster management regulations. That is why we went to the Constitutional Court to say, to the extent that the political space is closed, there may be accusations that elections were not free and fair because contestants could not canvass freely. The Constitutional Court was not with us on that argument, and we are yet to know the reasons because we are yet to receive a reasoned judgment of the court. And as soon as we receive that, we may be able to better understand why the court did not see the matters as we saw them. So for now, parties will have to obey the disaster management regulations that are in force at the instance of the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Just to obviate any confusion, the Commission is not responsible for the enforcement of those regulations, nor is it responsible for the policing of those regulations, even in the context of an election.
All right, so let's address the elephant in the room then, Mr. Sheburi. What in the order of the Constitutional Court gave you the impression that reasonably necessary amendments to the electoral calendar that you issued on the 4th of August, which the Constitutional Court said the word is remains applicable, what in that order led you to the conclusion that reasonably necessary amendments includes reopening of the submission of party candidates lists?
The very same paragraph of the order says the timetable is preserved only until the minister issues a new proclamation. And once a new proclamation is issued, and the order uses peremptory terms, it says the Commission must amend the timetable where it is reasonably necessary. We think it is reasonably necessary to amend the timetable to include new persons who have just attained the age of majority and who want to register for the first time. And once registered, they are guaranteed Section 158 rights and Section 19 rights in the Constitution. In Section 158, the Constitution says a person who is a registered voter in a municipality is entitled to stand for political office and, if elected, to hold political office. Section 19 guarantees every one of us, once we are registered, the right to vote, the right to nominate candidates, but more importantly, the right to stand and, if elected, to hold political office. We think, at least the Commission believes, that its role is not to limit the enjoyment of rights, but to facilitate access to the rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution. For that reason, the Commission resolved that it will not only open the period of candidate nomination, but many other activities that are incidental and consequential from the voters' roll being opened anew.
All right. Let me take a quick break, and then you and I can continue to engage on that particular aspect, because I'm glad you mentioned other activities that you are saying will also be affected by the amendments. But I've got a few hypotheses that I would want to test out with you in line with your thinking around the reopening of the submission deadline for the candidates list. That's Masego Sheburi, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer at the Independent Electoral Commission. He's back with me in the next few minutes here on the Intel. Stay with us.